Good evening and welcome to the Paranormal Lens podcast presented by Jott-Nyx Paranormal. I'm your host tonight, Chad Thomas, and I'm here with Kirstin Turcano and Jamie Widener. How are you guys?
Wonderful. I didn't have to move this weekend.
But you did have to help move me. Well, you didn't have
It's not the same thing, friend. It's not the same thing.
but I appreciate you volunteering to help.
It was either that or I get voluntold, so I figured might as well. If you offer first, it's easier.
This is true. So, well, I do appreciate your help.
Of course.
As you can tell by my background, things are different and they're not done, but it's a start. I'm here. So. So, what about you, Kirstin? How was your weekend?
I'm sore. Saturday, Alex and I did a mud run all the way down in DC. It was not supposed to be Alex. I had two friends that were going to go with me, but they were like, it's going to be cold and rainy. We don't want to go. So Alex took one of their tickets and he joined in. And yeah, I've done this mud run before up in the Poconos where it's all nice and flat. In DC, they like to use a motocross course. So there was a lot of hills. And in the rain, it's a lot harder.
It sounds like so much fun.
I enjoyed it, honestly.
Well, Alex is proof that not all superheroes wear capes.
Yes.
You know what? He
Way to
toughed it
step
out.
in.
Because again, this mud run was like more circling around women. It's called Mud Girl. So there was an area for me to like get rinsed off and changed. There was not for him. So we took a giant jug of water and that's how he cleaned himself off. But it was fun. We had a lot of fun. Definitely would do it again.
So,
Very cool.
well, you got a good guy there. So,
Yeah.
So, hello, Bert. We're glad that you're here with us tonight.
Yeah.
I'm sure people are starting to talk,
I'm sure.
They already talk. It's okay.
and we don't really care. So,
Nope. If they're talking about us, we're not talking about someone else. So
this is true. So,
all's good.
anything else interesting going on?
I mean, this weekend, I got the Ren Fair rehearsal starting up, so that's fun.
It's around the corner. Yeah.
It's right around the corner.
Yep. Dance recital for us next Saturday. We're not dancing.
You guys are dancing?
Be clear on that. Yeah. Let's be very clear.
Oh, you guys didn't tell me you guys danced?
No, we don't.
Well,
I was hoping to see some ballroom, maybe a tango.
yeah, that's not it.
Yeah, you don't want to see that. Nobody wants to see that.
I do.
So anyway,
I did realize something this evening. I was out walking the dog and thinking about like coming up this week, what's going on, and this is the last one before everyone is the last one. After this, all the events next year, of all the, there's a senior coming up, after next Thursday's last day of school. So, oh boy, time has flown.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, I have to schedule senior pictures for that one.
Yeah. I'm not saying I'm not excited that there'll be one of everything left.
I want to see this too, Bert.
But, oh my.
So, oh my. Well, we're not going to do that. The closest thing we're going to get to ballroom dancing tonight is maybe there was a ballroom in Mount Vernon that they used for dancing. But how's that?
Nice segue.
Close enough.
So, have either of you guys been to Mount Vernon?
No.
I've been past, but not been in.
Okay. When we talk about Mount Vernon, what do you think of?
Well, George Washington.
Yeah.
Okay.
His home, where he retired eventually after all his years of service to the country.
Mm-hmm.
A preserved location.
Okay.
That is available now for us to tour and see and so forth.
Right.
It was the place where Nicolas Cage kidnapped the president in National Treasure 2.
Oh, you're right.
And escaped eventually out the back end of a secret tunnel to
Always
to find a treasure.
there.
Enough? Did I cover it all?
I think you got most of it.
Are we done?
About right. That's right, pack it up. That's the episode.
Found time.
Trying trying to get my script back because I dragged it on the wrong screen.
Yeah, we've lost your audio.
Is it better there?
There it is, much better
Okay.
there.
So, yeah, my script had disappeared. It was buried behind something else, and I was like, oh no, I can't find it. But I did find it. We're good to go now. So sorry about that. Like you guys were saying, when most people think of Mount Vernon, they picture the polished white mansion overlooking the Potomac River and immediately associate it with George Washington. But the real history of Mount Vernon is far more layered than most people realize, and the story actually begins long before Washington was even born. In the late 1600s, land grants along the Potomac River were being distributed throughout colonial Virginia. Through John Washington and Nicholas Spencer, the Washington family acquired the property that would eventually become Mount Vernon in 1674. At the time, this wasn't some grand estate. It was frontier land defined by dense forests, rough farmland, and an untamed shoreline along the Potomac River. It was originally known as Little Hunting Creek Plantation, named after a nearby tributary. Generations of the Washington family slowly expanded the property. However, life there during the early colonial period would have looked nothing like the elegant images people associate with Mount Vernon today. The estate relied heavily on tobacco farming, which dominated Virginia's colonial economy in the 1700s. Like many plantations of the era, that wealth came through enslaved labor. An important contrast is the image of Mount Vernon as a symbol of American greatness exists alongside the reality that enslaved men, women, and children built and maintained much of what visitors admire today. The true transformation of the estate began with George Washington's older half-brother, Lawrence Washington. Lawrence served in the British military under Edward Vernon during the War of Jenkins' Ear in 1740, and he admired Vernon so much that he renamed the plantation Mount Vernon after him. At that point, George Washington was still a teenager. Honestly, no one could have predicted that this young surveyor from Virginia would eventually become one of the most recognizable figures in world history. After Lawrence died from tuberculosis in 1752, the property passed through his widow and daughter before eventually coming under George Washington's control. Washington first leased the estate before inheriting it outright in 1761. And once he became owner, Mount Vernon became his life's work. One thing often misunderstood is how deeply personal Mount Vernon was to George Washington. This wasn't just a political residence or a simple status symbol. It was home. Even while leading the Continental Army during the Revolutionary War, and even while serving as President of the United States, Washington constantly wrote letters about Mount Vernon. He worried about crop yields and livestock, construction projects and weather conditions, fish harvests from the Potomac, and the overall management of the plantation itself. Some historians have described Mount Vernon as the place where Washington felt most in control, and maybe that's part of why the estate feels so connected to him even centuries later. During Washington's ownership, Mount Vernon expanded dramatically. The estate eventually covered approximately 8,000 acres, and it operated as 5 separate farms, each serving different agricultural purposes. There was the Mansion House Farm, the Doge Run Farm, the Muddy Hole Farm, River Farm, and Union Farm. Washington moved away from relying solely on tobacco because tobacco farming was exhausting Virginian soil. Instead, he experimented with crop rotation and diversified farming techniques that were considered advanced for the time. In many ways, Washington approached farming almost scientifically, keeping extensive records about the weather patterns, soil conditions, and agricultural production. As a result, Mount Vernon eventually became one of the most productive plantations in Virginia. But there's another side to that success story. At its peak, the estate was operated by hundreds of enslaved individuals. By the time Washington died in 1799, approximately 317 enslaved people lived at Mount Vernon. Some worked inside the mansions as cooks, servants, and attendants, while others worked the farms, blacksmith shops, fisheries, spinning houses, and carpentry operations. Entire generations were born into slavery there, meaning families lived under constant uncertainty and children inherited enslavement simply by birth. Although Washington privately expressed complicated feelings about slavery later in life, Mount Vernon continued operating through enslaved labor for decades. That emotional and historical weight is impossible to separate from the property itself. In fact, some paranormal researchers believe locations tied to prolonged suffering can carry emotional residue long after the events themselves have passed. Architecturally, Mount Vernon also became a reflection of Washington's ambition. The mansion visitors see today evolved through multiple construction phases over several decades, with Washington personally overseeing many of these designs. One of the estate's most recognizable features is the cupola atop the mansion roof. Beyond looking elegant, it actually served a practical purpose by helping ventilate the house during Virginia's humid summers. Similarly, the piazza facing the Potomac River became one of the estate's defining visual features, offering sweeping views of the water below. Then, there's the illusion of the exterior itself. Most visitors assume Mount Vernon was built from expensive stone, but the walls are actually wooden siding coated with a mixture of sand and paint designed to imitate cut stone blocks. Essentially, Mount Vernon was designed to project wealth and permanence even when resources were limited. And honestly, that feels symbolic of America itself. Mount Vernon also became deeply tied to the birth of the United States. Throughout the Revolutionary War, Washington repeatedly returned there whenever possible. After the war ended in 1783, he resigned his military commission and returned home to Mount Vernon rather than attempting to seize power. That decision shocked much of the world. European leaders expected victorious generals to become dictators or kings. Instead, Washington voluntarily stepped away from power and returned to private life. That moment helped define the American presidency before it even officially existed, permanently linking Mount Vernon to the idea of Washington as a reluctant leader. Then, of course, came the presidency. Washington reluctantly left Mount Vernon again in 1789 after being unanimously elected the first president of the United States. But even while serving as president in New York and later Philadelphia, he constantly longed to return home. Letters from the period show Washington frequently discussing Mount Vernon in explicit detail, focusing on construction updates, farm production, livestock management, and even concerns about specific trees and landscaping projects. It's almost as though part of him never mentally left the estate. When Washington finally retired from public office in 1797, he returned permanently to Mount Vernon, and for a brief period, he seemed genuinely happy there. He expanded whiskey production at the estate, turning Mount Vernon into one of the largest whiskey producers in early America. He hosted guests constantly, worked the farms, rode horseback daily across the property, and continued planning the future improvements. But that peace didn't last long. On December 12, 1799, Washington spent hours riding through the freezing rain and snow inspecting the estate. Within days, he became dangerously ill. Doctors used repeated bloodletting treatments in an attempt to save him, but on December 14, 1799, George Washington died in his bedroom at Mount Vernon. The entire nation mourned. And there's another layer to this story that makes tonight's episode especially fitting. Just last week marked the anniversary of the death of Martha Washington, who died at Mount Vernon on May 22, 1802. After losing George, Martha reportedly became increasingly withdrawn. Historical accounts say she stopped sleeping in the bedroom where George died because the grief was simply too overwhelming. Instead, she moved into a smaller upstairs room and spent much of her remaining years quietly inside the mansion. Honestly, when you hear those details, the later ghost stories connected to Mount Vernon start to feel less like random folklore and more connected to the emotional weight that filled that house after George's death. Some visitors and staff over the years have claimed that sadness still lingers there, not just the presence of George Washington, but Martha too. Now, this is where the story of Mount Vernon begins to shift from documented history into something far more difficult to explain. Because for more than 2 centuries, visitors, staff members, historians, and paranormal investigators have all reported strange experiences connected to the state. Now, to be fair, Mount Vernon is already emotionally charged before you ever hear a ghost story. You're standing inside the home of George Washington, a place tied to revolution, war, death, slavery, and the birth of the United States itself. That atmosphere alone can affect people psychologically, but some visitors insist what they experience there goes beyond imagination, and over time, the stories surrounding Mount Vernon have become some of the most persistent paranormal legends connected to any historical location in America. The most famous apparition associated with Mount Vernon is, unsurprisingly, George Washington himself. Reports involving Washington's spirit go back generations. Some of the earliest stories emerged during the 1800s, particularly during the rise of spiritualism in America, when seances and ghost stories became incredibly popular. Visitors claimed that they could still feel Washington's presence inside the mansion, not symbolically, but literally. Witnesses over the years have described seeing a tall figure, dressed in colonial clothing, walking silently through the hallways before disappearing entirely. Others describe hearing footsteps moving across the upper floors long after the mansion has emptied for the night. What's interesting is how consistent some of these reports are, with many experiences centering around specific locations, which are Washington's study, his bedroom, the upstairs corridors, and staircases near the private living quarters. Staff members over the years have reportedly described moments where they felt as though someone was standing directly behind them, only to turn around and find empty space. Some describe sudden cold spots moving through rooms without any explanation, while others report doors slowly opening or shutting on their own, despite no noticeable airflow. Then there are the sightings themselves. Several visitors have claimed to see what appears to be a man in 18th century clothes standing briefly near windows or at the end of hallways, before vanishing moments later. Now, skeptics would argue there's a simple explanation. Old houses settle, wood creaks, and historical locations naturally create heightened emotional expectations. Now, that's all true, but believers argue there's something uniquely intense about Mount Vernon compared to other historic homes, almost as though the emotional imprint left behind by George Washington never fully faded. Now, according to local legends, George may not be the only spirit tied to Mount Vernon. Many paranormal stories connected to the mansion focus on Martha Washington, and honestly, her story may be even sadder. As mentioned, after George died in 1799, Martha struggled deeply with grief, abandoning their shared bedroom to move into a much smaller room upstairs. Imagine that for a moment, the most famous woman in early America living quietly inside this massive mansion, surrounded constantly by memories of loss, because just last week, the anniversary of Martha Washington's death on May 22nd, these stories feel especially relevant right now. Paranormal experiences associated with Martha tend to feel different from those involving George, less commanding and more emotional. Visitors have reported soft footsteps late at night, overwhelming feelings of sadness or heaviness, faint whispers heard in otherwise empty rooms, apparitions passing near upstairs windows, sudden, unprovoked emotional reactions while touring the mansion. Some investigators believe the emotional trauma connected to Martha's final years may have somehow become embedded into the environment itself. This wouldn't necessarily be an intelligent haunting, but rather a form of emotional residue, almost like grief replaying itself across time. Perhaps the most unsettling stories connected to Mount Vernon involve the tomb itself. George and Martha Washington are buried on the estate grounds alongside other members of the Washington family. and many visitors describe the area surrounding the tomb as profoundly different from the rest of the property. People often report sudden, unnatural silence. We've talked about this before in other episodes. Unexplained pockets of cold air, feelings of intense pressure in the chest, shadow figures darting near the entrance, sudden dizziness, unease, or intense emotional reaction. Paranormal investigators who have visited the site claim equipment has occasionally malfunctioned near the tomb area, noting audio disruptions, rapid battery drain, and sudden static interference. Now again, there are rational explanations for many of these experiences. Burial sites naturally carry emotional weight, and standing near the tomb of one of the most important figures in the world history already creates enormous psychological tension. But what's fascinating is how many people independently describe similar sensations there. It is not fear, but more like an overwhelming presence. Some visitors even claim the area feels quieter than it should, as though sound itself changes near the tomb, a detail that shows up in paranormal stories surprisingly often. One paranormal theory frequently connected to Mount Vernon is something we're all familiar with called residual hauntings. This is the idea that powerful emotional experiences can somehow imprint themselves onto locations, acting like environmental recordings trapped within a place. If that theory has any truth behind it, Mount Vernon would certainly contain centuries' worth of emotional intensity. Think about everything this property witnessed: the brutality of slavery, Revolutionary War uncertainty, intense political stress and national fear, deep personal grief, illness, and death. Some paranormal researchers believe these experiences may leave behind emotional echoes rather than intentional spirits. In other words, the hauntings at Mount Vernon may not involve conscious ghosts interacting with the living. Instead, people may simply be experiencing fragments of the past, replaying themselves over and over. Footsteps, voices, feelings, and moments somehow trapped within the environment. Whether you believe in paranormal activity or not, there's something undeniably eerie about that possibility. What makes Mount Vernon's paranormal reputation especially interesting is that many of the stories don't come from ghost hunters. They come from ordinary visitors and staff members who weren't expecting anything unusual. Tour guides over the years have quietly shared stories about strange noises after closing hours. Some staff reportedly avoid certain areas of the mansion late at night, while others describe feeling watched while working alone inside the house. One detail that appears repeatedly in witness accounts is the overwhelming emotional atmosphere inside the mansion after dark. It's not aggressive or violent, just heavy, almost as though the house itself remembers everything that happened there. Honestly, when you consider the history tied to Mount Vernon, that feeling becomes easier to understand. One of the more unsettling stories connected to Mount Vernon doesn't involve the mansion itself. It comes from the areas connected to the enslaved community that lived and worked on the estate. Now, unlike some famous haunted plantations, Mount Vernon doesn't have a long history of sensationalized ghost stories involving enslaved spirits. And honestly, that's probably a good thing. But there are still accounts from visitors and staff describing deeply uncomfortable experiences near the reconstructed slave quarters and work areas surrounding the property. One story that gets repeated involves visitors touring the slave quarters during quieter evening hours. According to the account, a small group had been walking through the area with a guide when one visitor suddenly became emotional for no obvious reason. The person reportedly described feeling overwhelming sadness and anxiety almost immediately after stepping near one of the cabin structures. At first, they assumed it was simply the emotional weight of history, but then several members of the group claimed they heard what sounded like faint voices nearby, despite nobody else being present. Not loud enough to make out words, just soft murmuring, almost like distant conversation. The guide checked the surrounding area, believing another tour group had entered nearby, but the area was empty. And what makes this story especially unsettling is that multiple people in the group independently described feeling as though they were being watched while standing near the cabins. One visitor later claimed the atmosphere felt completely different from the mansion itself. Not frightening, but emotionally overwhelming, almost oppressive. Now, skeptics would understandably point out that places tied to slavery carry enormous emotional weight. And they're right. You don't need ghosts to feel disturbed standing in a place connected to generations of suffering. But some paranormal researchers argue that locations connected to prolonged trauma may retain emotional residue in ways we still don't fully understand. And honestly, whether paranormal or psychological, stories like this may represent the most haunting aspect of Mount Vernon altogether. Not because they involve famous historical figures, but because they remind us of the countless unnamed people whose lives became part of the estate's history as well. Now, what makes Mount Vernon even more fascinating is the story isn't finished. Even today, the estate continues revealing pieces of its past. In recent years, Mount Vernon has undergone a massive $40 million revitalization and preservation project designed to protect the mansion during the America's 250th anniversary. During that restoration work, archaeologists made one of the most remarkable discoveries in the property's history. While excavating beneath the mansion cellar, researchers uncovered dozens of sealed 18th century glass bottles buried beneath the floor. At first, archaeologists thought they had found ordinary bottle fragments, but then they realized something unbelievable. Many of the bottles were still intact, and they still contained preserved fruit from more than 250 years ago. This fruit included cherries, berries, and currants. Researchers believe the bottles date back to the 1740s and 1750s, meaning they may have been buried before the American Revolution itself. Honestly, that discovery feels poetic for a place like Mount Vernon, a property so tied to America's beginnings, literally uncovering pieces of its hidden past beneath the floorboards. Archaeologists also describe the discovery as unprecedented in North America. Some of the fruit may even contain viable DNA that researchers hope can identify historic plant varieties from the colonial period. What makes this discovery even more haunting is the belief that the fruit was likely preserved and stored by enslaved workers living at Mount Vernon during Washington's lifetime. So these bottles are not just artifacts connected to George Washington. They are direct physical links to the forgotten daily lives of the people who worked the estate centuries ago. Discoveries like that reinforce something important about Mount Vernon. The past there never truly stays buried. Today, Mount Vernon remains one of the most visited historic homes in the United States, welcoming nearly 1 million visitors every year. Guests can tour the mansion itself, George Washington's tombs, the slave quarters, the working farm, blacksmith shops, gardens, archaeological exhibits, and museum galleries containing Washington family artifacts. According to many visitors, the atmosphere changes drastically depending on where you stand. People often describe the mansion as elegant but emotionally heavy, while the tomb area feels quiet, almost unnaturally quiet. Meanwhile, the slave quarters carry a very different emotional weight altogether. Some visitors arrive expecting a patriotic historical landmark, but they leave realizing Mount Vernon feels much more complicated than that. It isn't simply the home of America's first president. It's a place where every layer of American history exists side by side. Greatness, contradiction, legacy, and suffering. Maybe that complexity is exactly why the estate continues affecting people so deeply centuries later. Whether you visit for history, the archaeology, or the ghost stories, Mount Vernon has a way of making people feel connected to the past in a very personal way. And for some visitors, that connection sometimes feels too real. Whether the story is connected to Mount Vernon or paranormal, psychological, or simply the result of standing in one of the most emotional historic locations in America, the experiences continue. Generation after generation. Maybe that's why Mount Vernon remains so fascinating. It doesn't feel like frozen in history. It feels alive with it. And for some visitors, maybe it's a little too alive. So before we discuss, let me cite some sources. MountVernon.org I'm not going to list all the pages that I pulled up on that, but it's a very thorough website, and I would say check it out. I've used, I don't know how many pages out of there. www.history.com /articles /Mount Vernon. www.history.com /articles one of America's first travel trends was dining at George Washington's home. www.britannica.com /topic Mount Vernon historical site, and www.battlefields.org /learn /articles short history Mount Vernon. That was a mouthful, but I think that's most of it. So what do you guys think?
I'm trying to find words.
I never know which one of us is going to go first here. So sorry, Kirstin. Go ahead.
No, I'm trying to find words. It's interesting to me. I mean, first when you were bringing up the bottled fruit and how it was possibly from before the Revolutionary War, I always find that type of stuff interesting, because it's like that is something that's now sat in the ground for more, like, over 200 years.
Mm-hmm.
And they're still finding new things on this property. I like that. It's history. It's kind of us learning more about the past.
Right.
Definitely, I'm not surprised when there says about how the slaves' quarters energy is very different from the mansion. I mean, it seemed like Washington and his wife were happy they were at peace. Of course, in the mansion, it's going to probably have a more calm and relaxed energy, where the slave quarters was more hard work. It was probably not as pleasant. I mean, I also did, because I did see there was a comment from Bert that was, "You said investigators, can we investigate?" So I looked it up. Sadly, you cannot.
You cannot.
But I think it'd be kind of cool. I think it'd be a hefty price to go investigate there. But I think it'd just be interesting to just even go there and just experience that energy for yourself.
Yeah, I was there a few years ago when the kids were in elementary and middle school. Again, it was before I found my way back into this field. But there were definitely feelings in different areas. Like, not that I was looking for them at the time, but I definitely could feel things there. And the house was really interesting. I feel like I saw a shadow figure in the house somewhere, but I can't remember. But it's a gorgeous property. And I did not spend enough time there. I do know that.
Yeah. I would be, honestly, I'd be interested to go to the room that Martha went to after George passed, because I have a feeling that would probably be the saddest room. I mean, it seems like from what you were saying, like, her grief was strong, and I feel like that would probably be the room where you would feel what her grief was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Jamie, thoughts?
Before I do, let's catch up to some comments. First, I want to
Jamie was reading.
We know Bert and Heather are here. We saw their comments earlier, but Stefan has joined us as well as Paula, and Paula has a comment while we were going through the presentation that it's replaying life over and over, but never moving on. And there's that comment. That's a great way of saying it. You know, the residualness and the continuousness of all the energies. Heather commented that Washington put so much love and caring into that home for so long, the emotions have to be left in every part of that place. That's a very fair point as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then she added, I will be the first to say road trip. Very good episode. I learned a lot and now want to go and visit it. And if nothing more, then that's what we always inspire for. Get out to see the place, experience it for yourself. So,
And even though you can't do an official tour, we all know that, if your body's your best tool,
Yeah.
it can't stop you it's experiencing things.
yep,
And it
absolutely.
sounds like there's a lot of people who do experience things. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
When I was looking that up, like about investigations, it said most of the reports had come from staff.
they do evening tours and events in the fall. So they have some like after dark historical seasonal tours, things like that. So that may be a good time to go see some of this stuff.
yeah. So I have a couple thoughts, a couple things anyway. One, on that, I go back to that preserved food found under the floor. That takes me to my grandmother, and she was a professional canner, so she would be excited. She'd be like all in, let's try it. Um, there was some stuff in some jars in our basement. I don't know when, but she pulled them out every once in a while and found her way through them. So, it's a lost art, by the way. I think at least anyway for the mainstream. And
Yeah.
once upon a time, in her generation, was one where this is what we did. They came from Southern Virginia without a lot of amenities, certainly not electricity. So the spring house, kept things cold, and canning was a way to preserve. So
Mm-hmm.
it
There
was a
were,
necessity
my,
from the
my
era.
my grandmother was the same way. There was an area of the basement that's where all the canning stuff was stored. Anything that was canned, and they had a garden and they canned everything.
Yes, same story. They
Yeah.
must have known each other. That's what Nanas did, though.
Yeah.
I couldn't help myself when you were talking about Washington's, retirement from the military, then his retirement from government, especially the retirement from government, to go back to Hamilton and the King George song, which I'm drawing a blank on. But the line goes, Washington's giving up power and stepping away. I didn't know that was something a person could do.
Oh, you'll be back. It's the
Yeah.
reprise.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I always think of that when I think of, like when we talk about Washington in general, but like the whole concept of selflessness and, giving way to the next leader.
But
And that might to me is part of the bigger part of his legacy,
right.
and, well, I'm not going to turn that into common times now, but, the idea of secession and movement, the next layer, the next generation coming along is all
But
owed to this era.
Right. That's what the thought was. Again, don't want to get political, but that
Yeah.
was the whole thing. It was something new. It was like we don't want to have a king. We want new, fresh blood all the time, and it, to present that and to actually follow through with it was a bold move from Washington.
Yeah.
So,
Yes. There's a comment from Stefan. At my former home that was built in 1963, there was a large cabinet built in the basement for storing canned foods. Yes, yes, sir. And we had one as well in our home that was built 1900.
yep.
It was of an era.
My dad's house when he moved in had a dumbwaiter that went down to the basement. So you could load that up and put all your cannings, all the canned stuff, and send it down to the basement. So you didn't have to carry it down the steps.
That's fantastic.
That's
That's smart.
convenient.
How many times did you ride that bad boy?
By the time I was around, had been nailed shut.
So
Like it didn't move when my parents moved in
okay.
because apparently it moved on its own before my parents lived there.
Of course it did.
So
Well, there's nothing here that surprises me. And I don't mean that to be negative, but in the era of the home and the love and passion that not just George and Martha had for it, but the Washington family before, there is to me, and in my opinion, that there has to be activity here. And
yeah.
I can speak from, and I'm changing gears a little bit, but I can speak to myself. I grew up in a home built in 1900 in downtown Columbia. It was one of the mansions near the Wrights Ferry Mansion, big homes, and I love that house to this day. I love that home, and it's I moved. We moved there when I was 7. We bought it probably 4 years before we renovated most of it because it still had a hearth in the kitchen. It didn't no modern amenities other than electricity and heat, kind of thing. We put a furnace in it,
Hmm.
that kind of stuff. So I that home is home, like home to me, wherever I go. And there's a dream that someday maybe, I'll buy it back. It's not going to happen, but you know, um, but it makes me wonder, for you guys, is there that place? You guys being everybody who's out there, in the world, wherever you're at, catching this, what is that place for you? That one place that you're like, yes, that's my place. 'Cause that's Mount Vernon to Washington, and it always was for him, and that is evident in every part of it, in all the planning, in all of the consistencies that he had, all the oversight he provided. I mean, up to his dying days, he was out riding fields, checking on things, making sure things were done. There was a standard, and that passion, it creates energy. Where those things come together, there's activity. I
Right.
say that all the time. So that's why I'm circling this back to say there has to be something to this, at least to my opinion.
Yeah, I would agree.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I don't have that place yet. I mean, the house that I grew up in obviously has fun memories, but that's not my place. Um, it is for my dad, I'm sure.
Of course.
Um,
Yeah.
and someday I'll have that place. But yeah, I think we all have to have that. I think that's what drives us.
Yeah.
So I covered a lot of history, but there's things that I didn't even have time to cover. Mount Vernon was saved in like 1860 by the Mount Vernon Ladies Association, and when it was turned over, it was the typical. It was in disrepair and needed a lot of work, but it got restored again. We're lucky that somebody saw the importance and the value and took the steps to take care of it. So
It's kind of a miracle that you talk about go back to the Revolutionary War. The British were vindictive. They were mean, and they
Mhm.
went after things. We know this from the histories of our area. I mean, we're in the thick of it, and with Mount Vernon being Washington's home and him being a former British officer, and it turned into the leader of the rebellion.
mhm.
Like his home survived, and it seems surprising to me that they didn't go after it, just to burn it down or burn the property down, all of it. Um,
Mhm.
that just shocks me to some degree. Like I'm surprised, maybe not shocked, but surprised.
I,
And going through from the Revolution War into the Civil War, the same idea. Washington was a target. D.C. was a target. Alexandria, where it is, isn't that far out.
Mhm.
yeah,
So, there was a lot of activity here that could have taken this home from us. And it's maybe by grace that it's not been taken down
mhm.
through all those actions and those wars.
Well, and there's Monticello's the same way.
Right.
And it's the similar. They're not the same, obviously. They're both different, but Monticello has the same textured wood siding. Like it's funny that this is a scenic treatment. It's a standard scenic treatment these days to do stone. It's what these two buildings were built out of. Wood siding with paint and sand, and to make it look like they had more than they did.
Yeah.
So,
Well, it looks good from the distance, right? As you get close, you probably can start to see what it is by
mhm.
texture, but that's the appearance part. And that's why it's off in the distance a little bit as well. It's not on the street.
Right.
So,
So yeah, it's very very much worth the visit. Both those properties that I was talking about. Take a long weekend, 4 days, whatever, and go visit those two homes, and it's well worth the time. So
yeah. I'm going to catch up on a comment here. Back to the dumbwaiter. Uh, was Chad, was the dumbwaiter named Chad, first of all? Yeah. Haha. But much like many things in our homes as kids, yeah, Bert was the dumbwaiter for his mom. I was
and
the remote control for mine, folks.
yeah, the
And
TV remote. Yeah.
yep, in an era when we didn't have one. So, and then Bert said, "My home is wherever Heather is."
Aw, so sweet.
Guys, Well done, sir. Well
Yeah,
done.
good
I
episode.
guess it's time to ask the question.
Hmm.
You know, active, haunted, however you want to say it, or not. Paranormally active. What do you say?
I'm going to say yes.
Yeah.
Even if there's not things moving, and I think there are spirits there, residual, and probably probably intelligent.
Sure.
So,
I agree with all of that as well.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely think it's active.
again,
You know, it sure would be fun to go find out.
Road trip.
with all that's going on, that happened there, all the layers that I talked about, there's got to be something
Fun.
there.
And I mean, like you said, with the 250th anniversary and everything, and they're starting to do some renovations and stuff, that's got to be kicking up something. I mean,
Well, renovations there have been constant for years,
yeah,
and that's something. I think that's something that we're lucky about, that they have the finances, because they have so many people coming to
yeah.
visit this place that they can, like, if you go to their website, it lists all the renovations that they've done over time, and it's amazing, and they're not stopping.
I mean, it's like the mansion that's on the PA Ren Fair's grounds. It's a Victorian mansion.
Hmm.
And all of us, they posted like last week that they started renovations because they want to restore the whole part of the mansion to what it was when it was first built. And I sent it to a group of friends. I'm like, that is kicking up some energy, because as
Hmm.
much as the owner of that mansion likes to say no, there's no activity, that place is haunted. I've seen Miss Daisy, who was the one of the last owners of that mansion. I've seen her in the windows. I'm like, that's kicking stuff up.
Yep. So
Yeah.
here's some more
Yeah.
comments. This is Paula. I live near Lewis, Delaware, and impressed with the love of community to keep history alive.
Yes.
And we're lucky that there are so many communities that are willing to do that. And Lancaster is another one that does.
Mhm.
We're doing that. And Bert said haunted. I think more residual, but some intelligent also. So I think we're all on the same page on this.
Yeah.
So, but if you're not watching this live and you catch it later, please drop a comment and let us know what you think. We go back and keep track of it. So,
Absolutely.
I watch all the comments.
so, any other thoughts, questions before we? I'm not sure how we got to that one.
Nope. That was
Well,
probably me. I might have pressed the button there. I'm sorry. I
That's
clicked.
okay.
I
Jamie,
incorrectly clicked. I apologize.
That's okay.
it's all good.
But
All
but
right.
here's
Well,
here's where we're going next week, right?
Yeah.
yeah. So let's talk about what's coming up next week. I'm going to take on the topic of Mercy Brown and whether vampire or victim. This one might be a little different than what y'all are used to with us, but I found this to be fascinating, and
Hmm.
we're gonna bring it around, see what happens.
Cool.
And coming after that on June 9th, man, June, next week's June. Like, ugh. Kirsten's going to take on Shadows of Yokai, Spirits of Japanese Folklore. June 16th, Chad has the Crescent Hotel, where the cure became the curse.
Hmm.
I'll be back on June 23rd with the Fresno Nightcrawler. No fishing jokes on this one, please. Okay, good.
Not tonight.
Yeah,
No.
look at us. We're adulting. We're not telling jokes. All right. Cool. And wrap up June with Ashmore Estates History and Experiences. And July 7th, we are going to take a break. It's the end of the season. June 30th is the end of season 3 for us. We'll be back on the 14th of July with the brand new season 4, episode 1.
Hmm.
Ready to go. Time to recharge. And, Chad's going to be away, basically. So we don't have to run this stuff.
And Alex is covering 1 week for me, and I can't ask him to do too
Yeah,
much.
we can't afford him to do 2 shows, right?
Then he'll think he's officially an employee, and then we have to pay him.
Then we gotta get him. We gotta get him through HR, and no.
It's going to be too much.
Then we got to do shirts for him, and
Yeah.
no.
Yeah.
So, well,
Yeah, no.
yeah, we appreciate hanging out with Alex. So
We always do. Yep.
He's a
Well,
good-
you're more than us, right? You have to say that, but he's cool.
Listen, I'm telling you, if there's for some reason both you guys are not at this show and it has to be Alex and I, this is no longer Paranormal Lens. It's called Ghost Stuff.
stuff, and it's going to go forever.
Yes.
Heather, I'm so disappointed.
Well, at
There's
least
a
that's
fishing
after the
joke.
episode. See, by then you'll know what the Fresno Nightcrawler actually is, and you won't
I'm
make.
so excited for that
And
episode.
and Bert was being good.
Yeah, I appreciate that. At least there's one of them. One Lynch is okay. The other one, not so much.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
really hard to have both Lynches behave.
That's true. That's a fair point. All right. And to wrap up, ways to contact us, of course, you can always check out our website at www.jott-nyx paranormal.com. That's JOTT-NYX paranormal.com. If you want to reach out to us for any reason, and perhaps an episode to cover for you, you have a topic you'd like us to present, we're happy to do so. We do listener submissions all the time. You can reach us at info@paranormal-lens.com. If you're interested in all of our social stuff, we have a lot of things, including a store, all kinds of cool stuff. We can find that at linktree/paranormal lens. That's linktr.ee/paranormal lens. And if you're interested in supporting the show at all, we certainly would appreciate it. There are costs involved in presenting this every week. We are found on buymeacoffee.com/paranormal9. Or if you're watching us, you can hit the QR code in the screen right now, and that'll get you there. Anything is appreciated. We certainly value that support.
Yep. Kirstin was telling me earlier that she was checking out the store earlier and found some things she's just got to have.
There's going to be a lot of candles.
Nice. I got myself a new team shirt this week, so
Yeah.
that our lovely selves are on. So yeah, got to find a good place to wear that.
That nice little drawing up in the corner.
Yeah, you see it up there
I
now.
love that drawing.
Yep.
Yeah, so cool. It's the little things that make us happy, you know.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So guys, here we are, end of another. So really fun episode, Chad. You know, Mount Vernon is a treasure for all of us to experience. Obviously it's in Washington, so it helps to be on the East Coast. But so many people come in every year. You said almost 1 million visitors. I mean, that's amazing. And if you can't make it there, the website, I was checking this out a little while ago too. There are plenty of ways to support the enterprise there. It is a private organization. It's a foundation that owns it.
Yep.
So it is not part of the National Park Service, that kind of stuff. So the funding is unique, to be found. It comes through various grants and so forth. But a lot of it is from us as visitors and sponsors and donors. So,
Yep.
I always recommend taking a look at it, checking it out, and do if you can. It's going to a great cause and something that's going to be there for all of us through the generations to come.
Yep. It's an important part of history.
Yep. Agreed.
Cool. Any last thoughts before I wrap it up?
No.
Okay. Well, the home of George Washington helped shape American history. But according to many witnesses, history may not be the only thing that remains at Mount Vernon. So thank you for watching The Paranormal Lens. Stay alert, stay respectful, and stay curious. Good night, everybody. We'll see you next week.